Having had this kind of inspiration of ESPAS some time ago, when talking with American friends working in the NIC, of how you would be able to prepare ideas for an incoming administration, it was really perhaps in three different ideas which you were summarizing very nicely in the things that you take away from the discussion, that I think that it was always, first of all, about looking, as Jim Close has always said, not about the destination, but about the changes in the trends underway. So you can begin to get a feeling of the speed of change, and therefore, as you said rightly, the educational nature of policymakers, whether in administration or in the parliaments or elsewhere, that they can get a sense of that. And I think that secondly, of course, this is much more apparent in some sectors than others. So that, as you rightly said, in climate change, then climate change is something, obviously, which has been looking long-term. People have been motivated to do that, and people could see the incremental change of the environment because that was easy. The second area, which is very clear one, is demography, because you can see very clearly the aging of population. So you know that these things can be done fairly solidly with foresight, and so you can say, well, if that's not the outcome that you want, then you need to start making policies already today. And the third example is in digital, where quite clearly the speed of change in the technology, which is in the ESPAS report 2030, is phenomenal. So if you realize that 20 years ago we didn't have a browser system, 10 years ago you didn't have a smartphone, so if you see the photographs in St. Paul's and St. Peter's in Rome and the big crowd that the Pope is addressing, then there's only one person with their arm at the act, and he's probably waving at his auntie in the audience. But actually today you have everybody who has their arm out because they've got a smartphone in their hand. So you can see exactly the huge change which has occurred in our tech, but that was actually in some senses foreseeable. So it seems to me that if you move on from it's a process, the sectors are somewhat different. Then the third thing you come to, it's actually about prioritization of those things which are more likely to happen than others. And if you don't want that thing to happen, then you start doing your policy today rather than in 5 years' time, so that you make sure that your policy is going to be relevant. And an example there that I'd give is in the European Internet Forum, by which I'm a co-founder. We produced a document of the digital world in 2030, back in March 2014, which said we needed a digital single market. Nobody else had been talking about that up till then, but then guess what? It was taken up into the Commission's 5-year plan. So my conclusion in my introduction to this thing, and I'm glad to see that everybody's coming, and I think we're still waiting for Christian Leffler, I think that the whole process of doing something which is just a meeting, even if it's with ideas and experts, actually what people normally do, and certainly from a political way when I was a politician, I suppose still am, but 30 years spent in this institution, is you want to know you're feeding into something. You want to know that your ideas are feeding into something. And so the whole process of having created that 2030 document was that people felt to have been associated, you were producing a product which is actually feeding into the political process. So it may well be that what we need to do is to think, as we now are in this thing, and now I shall change gear and then begin to introduce the panel, is that we are actually in the process now of being able to say that this is our 5th ESPAS conference. I remember the first, it was in a hotel, a very academic kind of exercise. This has been a phenomenal institutional effort of a cross-fertilization kind in 2 different institutions with 15 different kind of scheduling sessions, more than 50 speakers. Phenomenal. My warmest congratulations to all of those who've been involved in putting this thing on, both here in the Parliament and in the Commission yesterday, on the future of society and the future of governance. Question is, now that you've got this wonderful band of people together, what do you do? And this is what this kind of session is now. The closing session isn't to say, right, guys, we switched off until next year, but it's now to ask those who are responsible for the system to be able to say, well, okay, what are your thoughts on what has happened so far? And what are your thoughts now what's going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months or so, given that the environment in which ESPAS is today is now very different from the kind of environment where it was first put together, and that there's a sense that there's actually a real need for some kind of ideas to be generated into the European political system, that we need to be able to, maybe that through this organization we can help with this process. Now, I guess chronologically, Jim, I'd go to you, but you've already been introduced. I guess people know Is it ladies
Take
first?
the big beasts first.
Oh, Klaus, I think actually, might I ask you, because you were meant to be at the beginning, but you weren't. So we ought to give you priority at the end to be able to kick off this kind of process. Doesn't mean to say you have to say everything now, but maybe just a few words to welcome us to the Parliament and to thank you very much as Secretary General for everything that you do, a so strong commitment that you have to ESPAS. Klaus, please.